The thing that always amazes me about Simon and Schuster is that it was a true startup. In 1924, Richard Simon and Max Schuster were just a couple of entrepreneurs with an idea.
I knew very little about Max Schuster, but the more I learned, the more interesting I found him. But there's a long tradition there, and as you know, it started out with a crossword puzzle book in 1924, and they were innovators.
When we decided that we were going to celebrate our 100th anniversary, we knew we wanted to make a list. And we gathered a group of people together and set up this committee to go over all the books we'd published and figure out which ones belonged on our top 100 list. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of conversations, a lot of debates, some very spirited discussion.
Which David McCullough?
Which Jimmy Carter?
Stephen King.
Yes, which Stephen King?
I don't know how the list went from 37,000 books to 100. It's almost impossible to fathom.
Simon & Schuster, A Century of Publishing, is a much more comprehensive, wider-ranging history book for Simon & Schuster, and it covers the founding through present day, everything in between. So those books were all ready to go and sort of in my head as I was writing the book.
At the heart of this industry is the relationship between the editor and the author, because it starts with the book.
Writing is a solitary pursuit, but publishing is a team sport. There are no better people, in my opinion, than book people, and the best book people work at Simon & Schuster.
Editors are eternal optimists. We always think, oh, this book is the one.
I think what they were striving for was a list that represented the diversity of the kinds of authors we publish in terms of subject matter. I think they were trying to have a mix of those kind of classics that are assigned in classrooms, but also those personal habits. God bless the person who had to do it. I'm just so honored that I had a book on the list.
What is it that makes a book worthy of being on that 100 list? I think it's a book that has changed people's lives in some way.
The Secret is a perfect example of a book that just became such a cultural phenomenon, or He's Not That Into You.
Just not that,
right. These are books that became part of the lexicon, you know.
And the culture. I was young and single when it published, and like most single women, I was desperate for answers. I think it was important that Simon & Schuster published this book because it reflected an important cultural shift for women of a certain age. The book immediately became part of the cultural zeitgeist and skyrocketed to the top of every bestseller list.
My focus is to find stories that hitherto had been outside the center, to make them the center and to give them a lot of attention. And I think that's what I did with How to Say Babylon, which is one of the 100 books on this prestigious list. And this is this amazing story of this young girl becoming a woman and finding her voice.
Douglas was a figure that people need to know better. They need to know what he fought against, what he fought through, and they need to know that the lessons of history are still relevant today. They don't fade, they don't age. And this was an opportunity to remind everybody about a very important period of time and a very important person in our nation's history.
We do take particular pride at Scribner in publishing award winners. So into the office come 151 pages of a memoir by a just retired school teacher named Frank McCourt. Frank McCourt walked into this building with a box and the complete manuscript of Angela's Ashes.
A no-brainer, right? I mean, Jesmyn Ward had to be on the list, two-time NBA award winner. There was so much of her work that we could have included. It was which one?
It didn't take rocket science to want to publish Stephen King. He's an extraordinary storyteller, and he cares so passionately about satisfying his constant reader.
There's this thing about reading a book as a child that you're never going to love a book as much as you do when you're a kid.
I remember reading from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Baisley Frankfowler. I remember reading that as a kid and loving that. And then I remember selling it as a bookseller and buying it for other people who were 9 years old and like knowing what they were going to get. So to see it come and be able to say, well, of course that's the book that we're putting on the list. Yeah. So I love that about this list.
Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is a book that as a child that I read that made me into a reader. The idea that I am now Judy Blume's publisher, that I'm the steward of those books, my 8, 9, 10-year-old self has no idea how to process that, like literally cannot process that. But the goal of that, being a part of that legacy, is then to find the next Judy Blumes, the next authors that are going to mean that much to readers.
I was very happy to see Chicka Chicka Boom Boom on the list because I don't think it's possible to say Chicka Chicka without saying boom boom.
I was not giving up Stregonona. I was not giving that one up.
Yes.
I wanted Creepy Carrot, but
There are a lot of books that I have both read and published that have awakened me to the idea, the impact of what YA could be. There's one in particular that stands out above all else. Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe by Ben Sands. YA has come so far, and because you have generations now of young people who are entering the world and they're so much more expressive, they're so much more energized and passionate and involved in the world around them. And YA taps into all of that.
All this time, I had been trying to figure out the secrets of the universe.
When I look back on my childhood, I wonder how I survived it all. It was, of course, a miserable childhood. The happy childhood is hardly worth your while.
It's strange how we always give big news to loved ones in a coma, as if a coma is just a thing that happens from a lack of something to be excited about in your life.
Audio publishing has been one of the most exciting and dynamic aspects of publishing these days, and we've been at the forefront of audiobooks.
When you get the right narrator, whether it's an author or an actor, the book takes on new dimensions, right? You're hearing it in a way that, your eyes might not have captured it. I was a diehard Springsteen fan growing up, and, one of the idiots, he used to sleep outside for tickets when you had to do such things to get tickets. We had signed him up. I was obviously incredibly excited.
I come from a boardwalk town where almost everything is tinged with a bit of fraud. So am I.
Bruce had his one-man show on Broadway. If you listen to the audiobook, it's experiencing that without the music. It's pretty magical.
We're also publishing into a 24/7 news cycle, which means the book needs to either lead the conversation or comment on it.
There were a variety of reasons why we went with Truman. One being it was published in an election year, and all the candidates, and they were all carrying copies. So that reflected, the way that this house has news-making books.
Right, that's true.
Well, I think probably the publication of All the President's Men by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein was a signal moment for the company, because that book really set the tone for all of the political nonfiction that we've published since then, and has established Simon and Schuster as the first destination for books about America and the political system and journalism.
I think authors beget authors. Authors are attracted to other authors. Authors want to be on the same list as David McCullough, or the same list as Doris Kearns Goodwin, or the same list as Bob Woodward.
We're a company that responds to the marketplace in some ways. I acquired A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman. It's charming, quirky novel by an unknown Swede, not completely translated yet, but I felt a real connection to it. I felt there was a spark there.
It was a small book until it sold millions of it. It wasn't a small book, but it was organic.
It went all the way to become a #1 bestseller, and we've sold millions of copies of that book. There's no machine that makes a bestseller. It's people who make bestsellers.
It really takes a village to create a book. You have people across departments from all different walks of life, all different ages, all different reading backgrounds.
I think that you have to publish something because you believe it's important.
Our job is to serve the author first and the reader.
Just to be around the just incredibly talented human beings whose passion it is to create those books, to make sure that people have those books. What an amazing profession. What an amazing company that allows for that to happen.
What you do know is you're part of Simon and Schuster, and our name and our reputation means a great deal. So that legacy is important. It's alive, and frankly, I hope I help to move it forward a little bit.
The legacy of Simon & Schuster means so much to me. As publishers, we need to have the intellectual confidence and commercial sensibility to trust our guts, to trust our instincts. And like our founders, we must still look to publish books that surprise and delight, that educate and entertain. When I look at that list of 100 years of publishing, I'm reminded of what a privilege it is to work here.
I think the reason why a lot of our authors have lasted and have occupied a place in the public psyche is probably because the books were well chosen by the editors and the publishers who worked here. There are thousands that have endured, and that is a true touchstone. And something to really be grateful for.
We should have like an alternate list of our, almost 100.